Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with some more speculation regarding the Thrones of Decay DLC. Yesterday we spoke about Nurgle and today we'll be speaking about the Empire, a faction that really does need a little bit of help, let's be honest there. Mostly because the Empire is, well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it's a hell of a mosh pit. There's a lot of factions there and it becomes quite the slog to fight through. You're dealing with Festus, you're dealing with Vlad, Draika, and then obviously Azag, so yeah, fun times for all. Which is cool, because obviously it's a active campaign, which means that you're going to be fighting a lot, but the Empire does need a little bit of help. Now, thankfully, we're getting DLC at the end of this year regarding the Empire, and there's two things that I can imagine will happen. You see, I imagine that there's two types of DLC that the Empire could get. One, focused around Faith and Steel. This would be Boris Todbringer. Well, not really paying for Boris, but paying for Ulrican units and all that type of stuff. But I imagine that's going to be later down the line, or going into Sorcery and Gunpowder with Elspeth Von Draken. Both of those are possible DLCs. I imagine they will eventually happen if Creative Assembly keep milking this game, and I really hope they do. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Especially since we know for a fact that the Empire is one of the most played factions, if not the most played currently. We don't know what the stats are right now, but it can be assumed that they're still on the top. So they're going to want to make as much content as possible, as they know that DLC for that faction would sell. Now, before anything, mechanically I think the Empire is fine. It could do with a few extra bits here and there though. A little bit of a restructure to the whole elect account system too would be nice. But they're supposed to be the vanilla style faction. That's how they were in the tabletop too. So nothing too out there, just something to give them a little bit of a fresh air boost. In terms of units, I think they're quite good. You have to keep into account also that the Empire is almost done in terms of units missing stuff. The Empire was one of the most well-rounded factions. Yes, they are missing a bunch of Lord and Hero options, which we're going to talk about later, but I don't imagine a lot of new things unless, for example, they get some new units in Warhammer the Old World. And even then, I don't imagine that's going to be anytime soon. Now, I very much believe that the Nurgle part of the DLC is going to be Tamukhan, so it makes sense for Elspeth Von Draken. Again, I know a lot of people are waiting for Boris Todbringer, but a theme DLC usually sells a bit better because there's an obvious matchup there, and it goes into quite heavy bits of lore, especially since the Tamukhan book, again, I can never stop singing the praises of that campaign book. It was one of the best. It's an absolute shame that Games Workshop never completed the series. Anyways, who is Elspeth Von Draken? Well, she's the Dark Lady of Null, the Magistrix of the Amethyst Order, and she is an advisor to the Elector Countess of Wissenland. Yes, she's not an Elector Count. She's actually, very much independent character more than anything else. We don't really know too much about this character. Many people see her as a dark lady, many people think that she's ancient beyond belief. Hell, there are even some rumors that she is a vampire. Or, and this is a very faint rumor within the Warhammer community, something that's a theory there, she might be older than humanity, kinda similar to how Constant Drakenfels isn't really a human, but something more proto-human than anything else. What we do know is the following: she is immensely powerful, one of the most powerful Amethyst wizards of all time, and perhaps one of the most powerful spellcasters to be walking among the Warhammer fantasy world right now. As a character, she's very secluded. She likes to keep within her own dark tower, but she does actually help out Null, mostly because her tower is there and she knows it would be good fortune for her to be in a good relationship with everyone in Wissenland, mostly the higher up nobility. If she helps them out, they'll help her out, which obviously does make sense. She commands a lot of respect within Wissenland and also a lot of fear, not just because she is a very accomplished spellcaster, but also because of her famed mount. She rides atop a Carmine dragon, which are dragons infused with the power of Shaiish, the Lore of Death. These are colossal creatures and absolutely destructive, so yeah, having one alongside you is obviously going to be quite beneficial to you. Especially as Carmine dragons do continue to grow, and I mean the size of Emperor dragons too, which is colossal to say the least. So that's some basic info regarding the character. She's not necessarily a good guy, more neutral than anything else, but leaning towards good. Even the colleges of magic, despite a lot of questionable characters within there. They're all pretty much wary of her independence. Balthazar Gelt, the current Supreme Patriarch in this point of the timeline, also is not really sure what she's up to, and often sends agents to track her, though mind you I imagine that those agents, if found, do not live for very long. She's definitely an impressive character, and it's one that I've been wanting to see in Total War Warhammer for a while, especially since it's something that we might get a little bit more context on. As we know, the character was more or less killed or turned into a husk at the end of Tamukon. Spoilers if you haven't read the 8-year-old book at this point. But afterwards, she comes back like normal. She looks like she hasn't aged. It's something very, very interesting, and I'm hoping that if we do get this as a character for DLC, we will get a little bit of context as what exactly happens at the end of Tamukon. Let's not go into the theory crafting too much. What would she do in the battlefield? Well, she'd be a elect account, even though she's not really an elect account. She'd just be in charge of Wissenland, and obviously she'd be a death caster. She'd have the Carmine Dragon, very potent spellcaster, which really the Empire could do with some more. Yes, we do have Gelt, but could you imagine a spellcaster just throwing out loads of purple suns like if it was no cost whatsoever? It would be absolutely amazing. The Carmine Dragon would make her extremely durable, and also possibly have some bound spells too. I know some people would be thinking then what happens with Countess Emmanuel, and I can imagine that Countess Emmanuel would be like the advisor for Elspeth, because it kind of makes sense. We've had that before with Forek, obviously having Cazador talk to him, so yeah, it's been done before. I wouldn't mind this being done again. Plus, Emmanuel doesn't really bring too much to the table. I don't really think that she's got that much interesting lore. I mean, she slept with Karl Franz, well, allegedly slept with Karl Franz, but that's pretty much it. Now, as usual, we know that legendary heroes are coming, and to be honest, I feel like we should be getting one per faction, not just like one paid and one FLC one, because there's a lot of characters, and the Empire has a pretty interesting one known as Theodor Bruckner. He was introduced at the same time as Elspeth in the Tamukon book, and he's known as the Hound of Judgment. A lot of people know him as the Simp, because that's what he kind of is. But yeah, he's essentially Elspeth's bodyguard, riding on a gigantic demigryph. Keep that in mind, this is a demigryph, just very, very large compared to all the others. And he's a big boy himself. He's a giant of a man, very, very strong. This guy is essentially the Empire version of Henry le Massif. He'd be incredibly powerful on the battlefield, and I imagine that his demigryph would make him very fast too when he's mounted. I mean, he's a very impressive character. I've got the model myself. I purchased it a long time ago, and it's one of those ones that I'm too intimidated to paint, because it's that cool. And really, if you're going to have a spellcaster character, it would also be quite useful to have a legendary hero which is good at melee, protecting her in case she needs it, especially early on, where she'll likely be on foot. Well, you do need a bodyguard, don't you? And he would definitely be the bodyguard. There's a bunch of other characters like Jubal Falk and so on, but they were Regiment of Renown characters, and I really much doubt that they'll introduce them as their own thing. It's a weird thing, because the Regiment of Renown system could be better if they had like a commander, right? I feel like that would just be really, really cool. But I think Theodore would probably be the best option, because again, giant mount, who doesn't want that? Maybe we can get some larger demigryph units too, you never know. But one thing is certain, it would be cool if the legendary heroes focused on more unique looking characters, and obviously unique looking mounts if they had any, as that adds in, well, more uniqueness. We're going to go into the generic lore and heroes now, and I really think that if this DLC is going to be big and they do tons of units, as they've said, and if this is going to be the Sorcery and Gunpowder DLC that we've all been waiting for, then it's about time we got the wizards for the Empire. Yes, we do have a lot of playable wizards, however, we are missing the gold wizard hero, which concept was released into the art book. There was concept art there, which means that, yes, that character is likely ready, and we are missing the Lord versions, as a lot of people do prefer spellcaster lords. For obvious reasons, you know, you want as much magic out there as possible, but it's also just the sake of variety. There are so many here, 8 missing Lord options, all looking quite drastically different. It wouldn't be like the same as the High Elf one, and then obviously the Gold Wizard. We need this. It's about time that the Empire got access to all its laws of magic, and through both Lord and Hero variants. It's honestly very bizarre that you can play as Balthazar Gelt, the Supreme Patriarch, but you can't recruit other Gold Wizards, or that you can't get the Lord variants, which would be very helpful to do with Festus, and then obviously a bunch of undead who are mostly going to be causing you problems over anyone else. Now, there's another hero option, which is about time that we finally get into the gunpowder / artillery faction. Yes, we do have a lot of gunpowder and artillery with the Empire, so this is the Empire Engineer, a rather cool character which had a mechanical horse, one of those models which was quite the pain to paint up, I must admit. I've got 4 of them, and yeah, it's a hassle. But this would be a buffer character, right? This could buff up your range units, this could buff up your gunpowder, this could buff up your artillery. Something which is more utility-based, but also have a few different weapons depending on the mount. Because on the horse, they'd have like a basic shoot attack, but then on foot, they could have a long rifle, because long rifles are quite cool. It's also something that I could expect in the Empire in the future. But yeah, a utility hero would be very useful. Boost up the capabilities of your stuff. And, you know, it's just cool. You need a little bit of an extra support, and support heroes are not as bad as you might think. We do get a lot of support heroes with different other races and factions, so it's about time that the Empire had a little bit there too. They do have a lot of hero options, let's be honest, but a little bit more wouldn't hurt. Alright, so now we're going to move on to the unit section, and before anything, yes, this wasn't a part of the Tamukon book, however, this was an older unit. These were Knights on Foot. The fact is, this was from like 5th edition, and since we know that Bretonnians are getting Knights on Foot, it's about time that we had some heavy armor foot knights for the Empire to be able to hold their own. We know in lore that they do have foot troops and so on. It's just never really been represented too much on the tabletop in later editions, but that could change in Warhammer the Old World, and it could desperately help the Empire getting a little bit more of a better front line than just greatswords, right? Greatswords are fine, don't get me wrong, but some sword and shield variants would be cool, and later this could be expanded upon much heavier when the Cult of Ulrich gets added in through its own DLC, because I do believe, again, that the Empire is going to get 2 DLCs, and then we could get other knightly orders on foot, like, for example, the Tutogen Guard, which were the Knights of Ulrich, essentially on foot, with great weapons, usually with maces. It would just be nice to have something early on to just tide people over. A better front line would just be useful in general. Don't get me wrong, again, great swords are great, but a shielded unit would be nice instead of using state troops, right? But now we're going to move on to Ironsides, and these were known as Null Ironsides in the Tamukon book, but they could be turned into a generic unit. Essentially, they're handgunners with heavy armor, meaning that they've got a few better stats, and with Jubalfolk they do a lot more damage, but in general, it would be great to have some heavier armor shooters, maybe with a few extra stat bonuses for extra damage and a bit more range. Obviously, this would be a higher tier unit anyway. You can get the basic handgunners quite early on, but it would be nice to have something a little bit better, a little bit more durable, and more destructive. Again, handgunners do last quite a lot for your campaign. You can keep them basically until the very end, but heavy armor, I mean, it just looks cooler, and in general, it's feeling like there is a progression for them, right? A stronger variant. Same thing as when you look, for example, to Warriors of Chaos, moving on to Chosen, essentially. Same battlefield role, just better, and yeah, that would be kind of nice. This one I'm not too sure about. You see, Hochland long rifles are essentially just Jezzails, or the Kefane variant. They weren't really its own unit. You could get them as upgrades and stuff, and you could get them with characters, but it could be kind of cool with an Empire Gunpowder themed DLC. Well, Gunpowder and Sorcery, as it would give you some extra long range to be able to pick some stuff out from afar, in case you might not have artillery, or in case you wanted to focus on a more single shot target type of situation. It could be working exactly the same way as both the Kefane and the Jezzail variants, where you'd have a group of like, I think it's what, like 30 or something? Obviously, half is the people moving the gun and firing, the other one is the people propping it up. They wouldn't be as defensive as, say, the Jezzails, because the Jezzails have a shield, but it could definitely help. Again, more toys is obviously very useful. I mean, who doesn't want more toys? The Empire was that faction that had pretty much all the toys, and if we're very honest, the Kefane faction, the Kefane book, in terms of unit styles, barring certain flyers and so on, is kind of just like copy-pasting from the Empire. So certain things could be taken from Kefane and given to the Empire, because from a lore perspective, you know, trade and all that different type of stuff, we do have multiple gunnery schools, just the largest one is in Null. So yeah, people would have probably built something like this and had it in mass produce if needed. And obviously we can't talk about a Tamukon themed DLC without talking about the Marienburg landship. So this is a really interesting thing because it's not actually an Empire thing. It's actually from Marienburg, which is independent. However, Marienburg did send aid down to Null and Wissenland in general because they knew how dangerous Tamilcon was. The fact that Reichland, which is closer, didn't do so is a bit weird. But hey, so it's essentially a wooden steam tank. I think that's the best way to explain it because that's kind of how the rules went for it. However, it is an impressive thing. Absolutely powerful, can move down very quickly. It's got loads of gunpowder, got loads of weaponry to it. Absolutely devastating too. It's one of those models which is phenomenal, right? Like trying to find one online now will cost you like £700 because they're extremely rare for obvious reasons. They were a Forge World unit, so a lot of them didn't really sell. But yeah, I mean, who doesn't want this? Now, a thing is that we know that Marienburg has its own culture in Total War Warhammer 3. Well, since Warhammer 1. And many did think, including myself, maybe they'd want to do a Marienburg DLC, as it would fit in with like a Southern Realms type of thing, put Marienburg into that distinction. And it's still entirely possible, but I feel like this is too good to pass up and give it to the Empire too, say as like it's on loan. There could be an interesting way of recruiting them, kind of how the Dread Saurian works, just to be able to justify that. And, I mean, it's just super cool, man. I can't stop looking at these models. A lot of people would want this. I want this really badly because, again, it's a Marienburg landship. It's one of the best miniatures that Games Workshop ever released for Warhammer Fantasy. Not only that, but it's a big thing. And with the Empire, yes, you could get a big thing, mostly linked up to the Imperial Zoo, but I don't know, I feel like this would be great. So there's not really other units that I could think of. I do imagine that dwarfs would probably get the most attention in terms of units more than anything else. But if you guys can think of anything, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, obviously. But I feel like this would be focusing around getting all the main missing stuff out of the Empire. Possibly a decent patch too, just to kind of fix them up a little bit. Though again, we know dwarfs are alongside this, and I imagine the dwarfs getting the most attention there too. Because let's be honest, Nurgle, Empire, and dwarfs, it's dwarfs needing the most help, then possibly Nurgle in terms of just fix-ups, and then finally the Empire, because standard-wise, the Empire is in a very good place. However, time will tell. Obviously, we're not seeing this DLC until the end of the year, possibly around November, December, so things could change. Brave Assembly could easily fix up the Empire with a patch and then just add in a bunch of units in the DLC and go from there. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm still excited either way. I really want Elspeth. We'll talk about the possibility of Boris Todbringer in a later video, I imagine, a little bit down the line. But I feel like this is the smartest thing to do. Go for the matchup that everyone's kind of expecting and then expand from there. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And with all that being said, have a great day, guys, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.